Okay, so in PHP, you can create files and you can read from files, and the files are actually stored up on the server. And so what we're going to do is we're going to basically talk about the different functions that are used to create and read files. And PHP has a read file function. Basically, it reads the file into a buffer, and then you can use the echo command to display the contents of the file. So if we have a file like this, and it's called IT terms, and the file was on the server, we could read it basically and display it using one line of code. We could just say echo read file, give it the name of the file, and it would display it. The display would not be pretty. I was going to say, yeah, we can. That is in my way. Okay, so that's the display. Not super pretty, okay, but it does work. There is another way that we can read files, and this one requires opening the file with the FOpen command. And if you guys have ever used C programming, okay, the commands that PHP uses for opening the file, reading the file, and writing to the file are basically C programming commands, okay? So FOpen is what PHP uses to open a file, and basically you're going to store the file information in a variable. And so when you use FOpen, you have to give it the file name, and you also have to give it an access mode. So an access mode is how you are going to open that file. Is it for reading? Is it for writing? Are you going to append data on the bottom? Okay, so R is read, W is write, A is append. If you use write, if the file already exists, it writes over the top of it. Okay, append basically will put the data at the bottom of an existing file, and if the file doesn't exist, it will create it. Okay, so append is a little safer than write. Okay. If you know that you want to create a new file, you can use X for an access mode. But if the file already exists, then it's going to have a problem. It's not going to execute properly. R plus lets you read and write. W plus lets you read and write. A plus lets you read and write. Okay, and the difference is W plus is going to create the file and allow you to read from it. So if the file exists, it writes over the top. A plus lets you read from the file and add to the bottom. X plus lets you create a brand new file and also read from it. So how you open the file depends on what you want to do. The second part of the command is, and I like this, I think it's very dramatic. So file open, and you give it the name and the access mode, or die. And then you give it an error message. So it's high drama with PHP. So basically, if for some reason it cannot open the file the way you want the file opened, the error message is going to display. Okay, why wouldn't it be able to open a file for reading? The file doesn't exist. Why wouldn't it be able to open a file for writing? There's no room on the disk. Okay, so there's a variety of reasons, but if it has a problem opening that file, it'll switch to the error message and display that. Okay, so here is an example of opening our IT file for reading. And so here, it's opening the file for reading, storing the information in this variable. Okay, and then to actually read the file, you have to use FRead. And so with FRead, you have to give it the file variable. So this is the variable that is saving the information from FOpen. Okay, so we would give it the IT file here. And then you also have to give it the size, and this is how much data you want it to read. In the case of our text file, it's going to read the whole thing. So we're going to say file size, IT file, okay, because we want it to read the whole thing. If you were dealing with records, fixed width records, you'd probably give it the size of the fixed width records because you're telling it how much you want it to read for that record. But for us, we would actually want it to read the whole thing. And so here it's opening it for reading. And then typically if you are reading from the file, you get into a little loop. And it'll keep reading until it hits the end of the file. So in our case here, we're having it read IT terms. It's going to read it in, display the information, then it'll be done. Okay, and so this little loop that says while not end of file, it's going to hit that fairly quickly with this. There's other types of files where it will continue to read row by row until it hits the end of the file. Once you're done reading the data, then you do need to close the file. Okay, and all you do with the close is it's just FClose, and then it's the file variable. Okay, so you open it, you read it, you close it. Okay, and here is an example. Opening the file, reading from it, closing it. Yep. Not formatted all that nicely. And that's basically because it's a text file. So if you have an all text file like that, you can use FGatz to read from it. FGatz is only for text files, and it will read one line at a time. Okay, so we're still opening it, okay, and we get into this little loop, and it's going to stay in the loop until it's at the end of the file. And now we're using FGatz, and we're reading from the file, and we concatenated a little break in there. Okay, so it reads one line at a time. So it reads the first line, and goes up here. It's not at the end of the file, so it reads the second line. Goes back up here. It's not at the end of the file. It reads the third line, and it keeps going on until it hits the bottom. And this is going to give you a little nicer format in a text file because we were able to add the break in there. Okay, so most reading is done using FRead, but if it's an all text file, you can also use FGatz. To write to a file, you can use FWrite. And the syntax is very similar to FRead because you have to give it the file variable because that's what you're writing to. And then you have to give it the variable that holds the string that you're writing. So all the data that you're going to write to the file is in this text variable. So basically you're saying where it needs to write to and what you are writing. So the whole little process here would be you use FOpen. And you can see I've got a little file here, opening it for writing, which means if the file exists, it is going to write over the top. And then I've got some text, Scooby-Doo, with a carriage return, which is basically an enter mark. And then I write it. And then I've got more text, Shaggy Rogers, with an enter mark. And I write that. And then I'm closing the file. Then I open it up, and I'm opening it for reading. This is all in the same section of code. open it for reading, and I get into this little loop where I'm using FGatz. It reads the first line, which should be Scooby, displays it, reads the second line, which should be Shaggy, displays it, then it gets to the end of the file, and it closes. And this is an example of what that looks like. So this example is showing you how to open with the append. So we've got our same fictional character file. Right now it's just got Scooby and Shaggy in it. Okay. Now we're going to open it for appending. And we've got a little text string with Freddie. We write that. We have a text string with Velma. We write that. And then we have a text string with Daphne. Okay. And we write that. We close the file. Then we open the file for reading. We get into our little loop where it's going to display each of the characters on a separate line. Okay, and then it closes out the file, and this is what that looks like. So this last example, same file. Okay, but now we're opening it for writing, which means the Scooby Gang is going to go away. And we are now filling it in with all of the characters, or my favorite characters, from Pooh Corner. So we've got Winnie the Pooh, adding that, Tigger, and my own personal favorite, Eeyore. So adding each of those to the file, and writing to the file and closing it. Okay, then we read from that file. And now we got 3 characters. So it's going to display Winnie the Pooh, then it's going to read and display Tigger, read and display Eeyore, then it's done, okay, and it closes. And once I select this link, that code is going to execute, and Scooby Gang is no more, and now we have Pooh Corner. Okay, so that's just an example of how those access codes are going to affect the files that you create. What you guys are going to be doing in your assignment is you're going to be taking the form from last week. You're going to be using the name and the email plus 2 other values of your choice, and you are going to be writing them to a file. And then you're going to be reading from the file and displaying it. Okay, that's the first exercise in the assignment. So here you can see a little example where I've got a file that I'm calling extremeadventures.txt. And I'm checking to see if the file exists. Okay, because I'm going to open it 2 different ways. If the file exists already, I don't want to squash it, okay? So if it exists, I am going to open it using Append. If the file does not exist, I am going to open it with a W for write. Okay, so 2 different ways. And so I've got my open, and I'm using the file variable here, extremeadventures.txt. And then I've got my data. So you can see I'm formatting it in a paragraph. I've got some text, concatenating it with a value that I grabbed from the form. Okay, so I already cleaned the value, ran it through all of the checks. Then I have got some text for email. This is the email value that I grabbed and cleaned from the form. Okay, and same with gender. So what you guys are going to have to do is you're going to have name and email, and you're going to pick 2 more, okay, to include in your string. So this is going to add to the bottom. You can see that I'm using FWrite, and then I close it. And if it goes through this and it's creating the file, then it's just opening it with a W, but everything else is the same. Okay, the way it's opening is different. So, you know, could I just open the file in the if else, and could I have put this all below the if else? Yes, I could have. That would have worked too. Okay. So it's kind of up to you how you want to code it. So I do have a live example. So if you look at the read file, okay, I can see some of you guys have been playing with this. This is what's in there now. And if you go out and you fill in the form and you submit it, it'll write to the file, and then you can read from it and you'll be able to see whatever it is that you filled in. Hopefully we're all going to keep it clean, so because it is writing to the file, guys. Okay, so to see the source code, everything that I used in here, we've just discussed. Okay, how to write to the file, how to read from the file. But if you wanted to see it in the context of the form, I did include these PDFs so you could take a look at them. Okay, so this PDF is basically reading. So you can kind of see if I'm checking to see if the file exists, and if it does, I'm reading it. Okay, and displaying the information. Okay, so basically if I had a problem opening it, I am displaying an error. And obviously, if the purpose of this is to display the information and I can't open the file, I'm going to show them an error and I'm going to exit, right? I can't do anything. But if I can open the file, okay, then I'm actually going to go through and display everything. And you can see I did the pre-tag here. Do you have to use the pre-tag? No, you don't. Okay, you guys can do however you want to display it. Okay, and as far as the form goes, the PHP is up top. This should all look real familiar to you because you worked with all of this top stuff this week. Okay, so where it's different is going to be where it's actually writing to the file. So you can see here, this is the redirect. Here is where it is writing to the file. So this is the code that was added, just right here in this little chunk. Okay, all this other code, the if else, the redirect, the test input, that was all there. Okay, so all I've done is added the section to write to the file. So as I mentioned, what we're doing this week is not going to take you guys a lot of time, assuming you have last week's assignment done. But if you don't have last week's assignment done, then you're going to want to quick finish that so you can do this week's assignment. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, well, this is kind of an easy week. So for some of you, it'll be a little catch-up week. File handling summary. So this just summarizes all of the file handling commands that we just talked about. So I can let you guys kind of read through that. But since we just went through all of this, that's all it is a summary. I did include the examples from the book. And in Moodle, there is code that you can download. So you can actually look at the code as well. Okay, so all of these are examples from the book. And you do have the code for those examples. And then we get into directory information. So for those of you that are familiar with Unix and Linux, the directory commands are very similar. I'm going to go through a couple of them, and there are more commands at W3 Schools if you wanted to take a look at it. Basically, the directory commands, if you're not sure what's on the server, the directory commands can come in handy. For me, because I have root access, I can just go in the folder and look. But you don't always have root access to the server. Okay, so you know, if you're paying for space on a server, they probably aren't going to give you that kind of access. So these are little commands that you can use to see what files are out there, okay? And in Linux and Unix, the current directory is represented by a single period. The parent directory, which is one level up, is represented by 2 periods. And you've probably seen this in FileZilla. If you look in FileZilla over on the server and you open up a folder, you'll notice that there's like 2 little periods at the top, and if you double click, it goes up a level. That's the parent. Okay? So you will see this single period for the current directory and the 2 periods for the parent in a lot of different applications. And this is kind of a Unix and Linux convention. The directory function is going to retrieve information from the specified directory. It has 2 properties, handle and path. Handle is the name of the directory, and path is the drive or the folders that you're looking at. So if I wanted to look at my C drive in the user folder, okay, I could set the directory command to C:/users. Store that in the variable D. And then if I wanted to see what the handle was, I just use my variable D with the little arrow and handle. And if I want to see the path, I can use D with the arrow and the path. And if I wanted to actually read the files that were in there, I could do a little while loop, set the file equal to D, which is the directory, arrow, read, and I can stay in this little loop while it doesn't equal false. So basically, I'm kind of looping until it hits the end, okay? Because while there are files to read, it is going to be true. Okay, and then I can just display the file name. And I believe I have, might be further down, I do have an example that shows you how to see what's in your media folder online if you didn't have direct access to it. Okay. Open directory, read directory, close directory. So these are all additional functions that let you see what's in your directories. They're typically used together. And so we have directory. You can see I've got /media, and it does work better to use relative locations because you're obviously going to want to test this in your test environment. And your test environment and the directory system on the server may not be exactly the same. So if you use relative locations, like if you know you have a media folder inside the current folder, you know, doing /media makes sense. Okay, so the relative locations work better. So if I set my directory as /media, I can check to see if the directory is there using is directory. And then I can try to open it. Open directory and store it in DH. Then I can get into this little loop where I'm actually trying to read from the directory. So I've got read directory, DH, and as long as there's something there, I can display it. And then at the end, I close the directory. So this live is here. So looking in lesson 7 in the media folder, this is what I have. Not very much. Not much in my media folder. So for this one, there is a little bit more. This is from the book. because it is looking at a little different directory. Okay, so you can choose what you're looking at. Okay, so you just have to give it the information. Now, I'm not going to make you guys do an assignment with directories. I just wanted to point out that it is available for you to use. Because, like I said, not everybody gets to see what's on the server. On most Linux servers, I will show you a little trick. Microsoft servers don't let you do this. But Linux servers, you can actually, if you know the directory structure, you can key it in and you can see what's in there. If it is a Microsoft server, you can't do that. Okay? Microsoft doesn't allow that on this, their software doesn't, but Linux does. I mean, so if I had a CSS folder, and I'm not even sure if I do. Yeah, I do. Okay, so if you know what your structure looks like, you can actually see what's in there. Working with images. So there's really 3 things that you may want to do with PHP regarding images. And 2 of them you will have the option of doing in the assignment. So one thing that I like to do in PHP is put the copyright on an image. And yeah, I know how to use Photoshop, and I can easily put the watermark across the entire image in Photoshop, but that is kind of a pain if I wanted to then print the image, because if I don't have one that doesn't have the watermark, I got to go into Photoshop, into the Photoshop file, and get rid of the watermark. And in PHP, your images remain untouched, and you can use code to place the watermark over the top without changing the original image. Yes, so I'm going to show you how to do that. You can also use PHP to create a CAPTCHA, which are our favorite things, right? They're so annoying. So yes, I will show you how to do the CAPTCHA. You can also generate pie charts and bar charts from SQL data. We're not going to get into that, but all of this involves using SVG graphics. SVG graphics are scalar vector graphics. Vector graphics are line-based, so they are preferable because you can make them bigger, you can make them smaller, and the quality stays the same. Okay. So we are going to do the watermarks and the CAPTCHA, and then in your assignment, you guys get to choose. I'm going to show you how to do both, and you can either do the watermark or the CAPTCHA. It's going to be up to you which one you want to do. So, creating a graphic that displays text. Surprisingly, there are 7 steps. You would not think it would take that, take that much to throw some text on a graphic. And each one of these steps involves using a function, okay, a PHP function. So first step is loading the header, indicating the content type for the graphic. So we have to use the header function. Then we have to create an image using either ImageTrueTypeFontText or ImageCreate. Both of those are functions. We're going to use ImageCreateTrueColor. Okay. Then you want to specify the text or the background color. To do that, it's ImageColorAllocate. Then you want to fill in the background color. Okay, that's ImageFill. Then you want to attach a text color. You want to position it. You want to create the message. That's ImageString. Okay. Then, after you do all of that, you want to load the image to the screen. Okay. So it's either image ping or image JPEG. It just depends on what kind of image you're creating. Okay. And then once you're done and the image has been loaded, you want to free up memory and the resources, so you do image destroy. Now that does not destroy what you just loaded, okay? That just basically frees up resources on your system, okay? Because you're done working and creating the image. So for the header function, for graphics, you're either going to be doing PNG or JPEG. It's possible you could do PDF, but these are the headers for each of those types. Now, what if you wanted to do a completely different type? Like if you wanted a TIFF image or something, well, you could make a guess, or you could do a little search on it and see if that type is allowed, okay? But these are what's most common. That's why I included them. Image create true color. Basically, you've got a variable that you're going to use for your image and set that equal to image create true color, where you're giving it the width and the height of the image. How do you know the width and the height of the image? Okay, well, a really easy way, and I don't even know if I have any images on this computer. Hopefully there's one in here. Oh. Let me quick download one. Let's see, a waterfall. A nice little tropical waterfall here. Let's see if we can get the image there. Downloads. All right, so if I wanted to know the dimensions of this, if I go to View and Content, and make that a little smaller, I can see the dimensions. I got the width and I have the height. So that is what I would put in the PHP for the width and the height. Okay, so it's basically you go into your File Explorer and change it to Content View. Okay, not only will it show you the width and the height, it also shows you the size, if you're concerned about how big it is. Okay, so you're going to give it width and height. And if you put the wrong dimensions in there, it does make your image look kind of funky. So I would probably almost always look and verify what your width and height are, okay? Because that way your image will look nice. Image color allocate. So this is where you're picking colors for your background, because what are you going to have behind the image? And what are you going to have for your text? Okay, if you have text on there, what color do you want it? And so you have your image variable here, and then you have to give it a value for red, green, and blue. So you can use 0 to 255, okay, for red, green, and blue. Or you can use the hexadecimal values for red, green, and blue. So how in the world can I figure out a color? Well, and I will tell you that if you put 0 in for red, green, and blue, you have black. And if you put 255 in for red, green, and blue, you have white. Okay, because these are the colors of light. So if you go to something like this, which is a color picker, you see we have red, green, and blue here, the different values. So you can simply find a color you like and use those RGB values. Okay, so this actually makes it pretty easy to get colors. Okay, and if you don't like that one, I have other choices. But to me, that first one is super easy. Okay, and if you're familiar with Photoshop, it's very similar to what you see in there. Okay, so here are different color sets. I've got white, black, teal, gold, and orange, which happens to be my favorite color. And so you can see how I've got the different color values set in there. And then these are the hexadecimal equivalents. Okay. Personally, I think using the numbers 0 through 255 is way easier than using hexadecimal. Okay. But, you know, for those of you that like hex, feel free to use it. As long as it comes out in the colors that you want, it does not matter to me. I love orange. See? Because orange is awesome, just saying. Okay, image fill. So basically this will fill an image with color. So basically you got your image variable, you're going to give it an X and a Y coordinate, and the color that you want filled in. So if I wanted a white background, for example, I might give it a 0, 0, which is the upper left corner, okay, and fill that in with white. Image string. So this is actually a complicated little function because you have to give it your image variable, and then you are giving it an integer value for your font size. You are giving it an integer value for the X and the Y coordinate. You are going to give it your string to display, and you're going to give it a color. So if you look here, here's my image, here's my font size, here's my X and my Y, which is going to position the string. Okay, and then here's my string. Subliminal messaging at its best. And then, yes, and then the color of the text. Okay, and then at this point, we would want to load out the image. So here you can see I've got my image create true color, got the dimensions, and I'm not doing much to this image, I'm just loading it, okay? And then image destroy frees up the memory associated with creating the image, but the image itself is going to remain there. So if you just wanted a simple rectangle with some text in it, like that, just a simple little rectangle, okay? Takes all this code to create that. So the header, I did a ping. Okay, I could have used JPEG too. And then I've got image create true color. That's the dimensions of my rectangle. Then I've specified orange text. Okay, and I'm associating here with the image. And these are the RGBs for orange. I've got my white background using image color allocate. Everything set to 255, which is the highest value you can have for the red, green, blue. Then I fill in my image with that white background. Okay, 0, 0 is the upper left corner. And remember, the size of the image is 220 by 120. Then my image string, connecting it to the image. Font size is 30. Then I've got my X and my Y. I've got my string, my orange text, and that's what it looks like. Now, could I have monkeyed around, moved it down, moved it over? Yes, I could have. I could have messed around and tried to position it in the absolute center, but I thought that was good enough for an example, okay? So at this point, then I loaded it, and then I freed the resources. And you can see at this, all of the code has run at this point, and I can still see the image. So the resources have been freed, and it's still there. Okay. Now, to display a photo with watermark text, these are all of the steps. So it's pretty much the same steps as before. The only difference is I'm going to use a text variable, and I'm also going to use a font variable. And then to create the text and position it, I'm going to use a little function called ImageTrueTypeFontText. Okay, so this little function is new. Okay, so ImageTrueTypeFontText writes text to an image using TrueType fonts, just exactly what you would expect it does. Okay, and so for this, I have to give it my image variable, how big I want the font, what I want the angle to be. Okay, so a lot of watermarks are angled. Okay, so what I want the angle to be, the X and the Y coordinate. So you can kind of look at the X as the left and the Y as the top, if that makes more sense, right? Because we're kind of used to positioning things from the top and the left. Okay, so Y is top, X is left. Okay, so you are going to be positioning the starting point for the text. You're giving it the angle, and from that point, it's going to display the text. Okay, and then I've got the color of the text, the font I want to use, and the text itself. So this code will create a watermark. So I've got image ping. And notice that even though the header says image ping, in my media folder, I'm using a JPEG. Okay, so the actual file that you use does not have to match the file type. Okay, so I'm using a JPEG here, which is a photo. Okay, and so this is my image coming from my media folder, storing it in IM, and then I'm creating white, gray, and black for colors. My text, this is the copyright symbol, the HTML equivalent of your copyright. Lisa Ballbeck Photography. I have a font folder that I uploaded Caviar Dreams to. Caviar Dreams is a TrueType font. Okay. On your computer systems, you all have a font folder. And any of the fonts in that folder, you can upload and use. Okay. They're all pretty much TrueType fonts. Image TrueType font text. So it's loading up my image. 52 is my size. 55 is the angle. So 45 is kind of like this. So I angled it up a little bit more. Okay. 6 is the left. 800 is from the top, which makes sense, right? If you're angling it up and it's going to start down here, you know, it's got to be down further from the top. Okay. And then I've got black. I'm going to load my font, and I'm going to load my text. So what I'm using this for is I wanted my text to look a little 3D. So I'm putting the black on the bottom, and then you'll notice that I do pretty much the same command. All the settings are the same, except my X, which is from the left, it's 5 instead of 6. And then I'm using white. And so what that does is it makes it look 3D. Okay, so then I've got image that I load, and then I free it up. And that is what it looks like. And you can kind of see it looks a little bit 3D. Without putting the black on the bottom, it's harder to see it. And I have another example. So you can kind of see how it looks. And this is the font I chose, although I think Caviar Dreams looks different, so it probably subbed in a different font if the system couldn't handle it. For my second example, the only code that really changed, obviously, was the image code. And the size of the image is a little bit different. So then I had to use a little different font size, a little different angling. Now, when you guys go to test this, neither image displayed in Laragon. I could not get the watermarks to work in Laragon. I do not know. They display fine online, and they displayed in the dev server. But I could not get them to display in Laragon. So just kind of take note of that. So this may be something that if you're using Laragon, you'll just have to transfer it live and then kind of do some tweaks based on what you see on the server. And if you have trouble with it, I can log into the server in the back and we can pull up your file and edit it right on the server. Okay. Yeah. So I don't think this is going to be that big of a deal. You'll just have to find whatever image you want to put a watermark on. I did include some additional commands you may find useful because you can create an ellipse, either an outline or a filled in one. You can create polygons, and you can create lines. And when we do the CAPTCHA, there's always lines across a CAPTCHA. So with a line, you basically have to give it an X and a Y coordinate, which is a beginning point, and an ending X and a Y coordinate. And then whatever color you want to draw the line with. Okay? So, and you're still drawing it on an image. So for our image, I took the height, divided it by 4, and the width. And then you can see later on, I took the width and divided it by 2, just to find different starting and ending points to create those lines on the image. So for a CAPTCHA image, how we are generating the numbers. We are using the rand function, and we're grabbing a number between 0 and 999. Then we're taking rand, and we're running it through MD5, which calculates the hash of a string. So we're running it through something else to give us numbers, text, something different, okay? And this is going to be way longer than what we need. So then we end up substringing into this and grabbing like 5 of the characters and displaying that. So you start by specifying a height and a width. Then you use ImageCreate, and you give it the height and the width. And here we are getting this random value that we're going to display as the CAPTCHA. And then here is where we're substringing in. So we're going in, it's normally 32 characters long. So wouldn't that be a horrible CAPTCHA to have to type in? That would be downright mean. So we're basically substringing in. We're going to grab 5 of those characters. Yeah, I was going to say, unless you want to be incredibly cruel. And then I'm specifying some different colors. And because I like orange, I filled the background rectangle in with orange. And then I've got my image string where I'm specifying the size, the X and the Y coordinate. This is my CAPTCHA value, and the color of my text is going to be black. And then I draw lines on it. Okay, and then I'm telling it what my header content is, so this is going to be a JPEG. And then I load it, and I free up the resources. And this is what it looks like. And every time I reload this, you can see I'm getting different values. Yep, and they're letters and numbers. Yeah, they should be different. And I know some CAPTCHAs, what they do is they'll display the first two horizontal, and then they'll have some angled. So what they're doing is the function that angles the text, the GetTrueTypeFont function, they would be substringing in and throwing a couple of the characters in that. Do you guys need to do that? No. I think that's really excessive. I have a hard time, yeah, when they really when they distort the letters, it's super hard for me to read them, and I'm not a robot. So for your assignment, you have the option of doing the watermark or the CAPTCHA, one or the other, okay? Yep, and then if you look down here, if you're kind of into doing images, chapter 14 covers images, and these are all of the exercises that come from chapter 14. So if you're curious to see what some of those look like. So it does get into doing the charts if you're curious. This is actually Image Creator. If you wanted to practice with that, that's their CAPTCHA. So you can actually look through the code used for this because I have it in Moodle. You just need to download and unzip it. Okay, so your assignment, let me quick stop this.